Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the IT Bridge. I'm David Lawrence. I'm the one of the founding partners of Grant McGregor. I'm joined today by my colleague Paul Sinclair, who is a Cyber Essentials certified assessor and a Cyber Essentials cyber advisor. And we're going to talk about all things Cyber Essentials and get into the nitty-gritty of why you need it, what it's about, and what's changing. Morning, Paul.
Morning, David.
How are you today?
Yes, fine and well, thank you.
Good. So excited to talk about Cyber Essentials. 11 years old, I think, Cyber Essentials now.
Yeah, about that.
So it's been around a while. More and more organizations are now aware of Cyber Essentials. But for some people that might be listening, watching this, probably a good place to start is how would you explain Cyber Essentials to somebody that might not be familiar with Cyber Essentials?
Yeah, good question. The Cyber Essentials is essentially a framework that's been set out by the government, backed by the NCSC. The vision there was to create a sort of small framework that started off to allow businesses irrelevant of the size within the UK to be aware of their own IT infrastructure and to create a standard security posture round about it. And that was to simply just allow businesses, even if they don't have an IT department or a IT support partner, have some form of groundwork to put in, relevant controls to secure their business.
I mean, what we've certainly found is this isn't a sledgehammer to crack a nut type compliance. It's a very specific but focused compliance here that's not too odious on the organizations that are going through or want to go through Cyber Essentials. There's those 5 sensible controls that are just, to be honest, let's be honest with ourselves, but that are really just basic standard controls that organizations should have in place now, or good. So that's cyber hygiene. As we were saying, more and more organizations are compliant with Cyber Essentials, are working through the Cyber Essentials framework. Why do you think it's important, or what has been important for them to go down that Cyber Essentials route? What is the value that they're getting from it, do you think?
The real value there is to have the confidence for their own business, understand that they have the relevant 5 controls that C is about in place, and they are the fundamental starting points for any organization to secure their IT infrastructure or their IT posture. So having that confidence and having that certificate that you can hang on the wall and shout from the rooftops a little bit to your own partners, customers, and suppliers to say that we're taking our IT security seriously.
That's some good points. And I think just to add, and I think of it like, as you were saying, is, peace of mind for any organization. When you run a business or start a business, there's kind of those key things that you ought to have in place. There's some legal responsibilities, but you'd have good health and safety in place for your people and for the customers. If people go on site, you have business insurance. It's kind of a must, and then a good accountants to have your back, that you're providing the legal obligations that you have for the accounts. I think lastly, Cyber Essentials sneaks in there as something which ought to be as serious as an insurance policy for your computer systems, your cyber. That's really important.
100%. You think about, starting a business or running a business as yourself. Nobody teaches you how to do this. So you need some form of guidance. And the guidance is there. It's, the guidance is readily available from the government on their website. There's some great resources and documents about how to set the controls in place. And then
And we're seeing more and more organizations coming to us, large and small, that are a little bit fearful of their IT infrastructure, feeling it might not be secure enough, or that they've had some threat actors, and whatever the reasoning, they're seeing they reaching out, say, well, how do I feel or become more cyber secure? And, as a cyber assessor and a cyber advisor, Cyber Essentials is a really good framework just to give them the confidence that if they adhere to those principles, it just makes it less risky.
it does, but also gives you that understanding piece going forward. So once you have the building blocks or the foundations in place of understanding cyber essentials and the controls, you'll then understand, or it'll help you understand, further enhancements in security practices that you'll undertake for further down the line.
I was at a meeting yesterday, get clear with who or what it was about, but it was very obvious in their sector who looks after lots of different organizations that these threats are they're rampant, let's be honest. I mean, organizations sometimes feel that they're too small to be affected by, ransomware, threat actors, even state actors. And I think it's very hard for those organizations to know that actually this is real, day-to-day stuff that organizations have been targeted. Well, I mean, what would you say to that? I mean, to dispel that myth that it's not a case of if, but when.
Unfortunately, that's the world, the business world that we're in now. So it's not if at all. It's when. So what C will allow you to do is just put in controls to just help mitigate, to make it more difficult, to make it more complicated. From conferences and talks that I've been at and been involved in, these guys are looking for sort of easy ways into your organization. So if you're bolting the door, say, and making it sort of less easy, more often than not, they'll move on elsewhere.
Yes.
Size generally doesn't matter now. You probably have argued 10 years ago, you were looking for bigger organizations, but it's all the way down to single users, sole traders, to be fair, because it's been seen as a disruptor. So you can disrupt a single user or a small organization, but you don't know who these organizations are working with and working for, who your customers are.
That's a good point.
So it will then filter down the supply chain, and that's essentially what's trying to happen here. So disrupt one organization can then disrupt 10 organizations or 20 organizations, and it can create that ripple effect from there. And it just takes one of these organizations to have a good bit of capital behind them that'll try to be extorted. And unfortunately, that's what's happening.
Well, that's an interesting last point there, because I know that organizations, large or small, have to submit their accounts, either to, if it's a charity, to Oscar in Scotland, or if it's a limited company, a business, a private limited company, have to submit it to Companies House and HMRC. So what's very clear is the cash that those organizations have. And if there's a substantial amount of cash in reserves or capital that these organizations have, the threat actors are just going to go onto the public available records online and look at these organizations, and then they'll be targeted. So that's I think, a very good last point. So one of many hats that you wear and that you're certified in is the Cyber Essentials Cyber Advisor role. And that's kind of relatively new in this last couple of years.
Yeah, 3-4 years.
Created by the National Cyber Security Centre, delivered through IASME. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you think the objective is of that the cyber advisor role might, I think it really underpins UK cyber strategy going forward.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, it's an advisory role. So the first and foremost thing there is to remain impartial.
Yes.
So you can essentially advise any organization with any cyber-related inquiry that they may have. So, it could be an organization just thinking about, how to secure down our mobile phones. What options are out there to do it. So, taking your cyber essentials framework, you're not so you're not putting them through cyber essentials. You're giving them impartial advice. So you're pulling that from NCSC guidance and your own experiences, from over the years of saying, well, and to secure your mobile phones, you can do it in this way, or you can do it in that particular way, and you have to go into understand the business. So it's not about picking out the enterprise style mobile phone compliance tools and getting them to apply that. It's about understanding organization, but helping them and training them along the way. So they're getting essentially impartial advice from a NCSC trained professional, call it that way.
Yeah, and that's very useful to understand that. Thanks, Paul. And I think I know that the NCSE, their objective when delivering this program, the certification, really wanted to have a resource available to small organizations in the UK that are worried about their cyber threats or their risks and not knowing who to phone. I mean, it's not like you can pick up the Yellow Pages or go online and find cyber advisors or easily. And 9 out of 10 times they're quite expensive at the enterprise level. So this gives confidence to small organizations and large, smaller organizations to say, how do I start this journey? And then, as you said, the NCIC, the National Cyber Security Centre, created this program, which I know from the events we've turned up to, that's a really big push over the next number of years to make that program readily available and to highlight it to the wider community in the UK that it's there.
Was I touched on earlier, even small business, nobody teaches you how cyber or security posture or anything like that. So having that scheme available from the NCSC just allows us to be able to give that, as I said, impartial advice to anybody that needs it.
I think that's the key, because it's irrelevant if you have an existing IT partner or you have in-house IT support. It's this compliance, not compliance, the program is designed to be impartial and fair. Good. You said earlier, Cyber Essentials has been around quite a long time now, about 11 years, and it's a very straightforward standard compliance. What has evolved, as you would expect, as technology changes and the risk landscape changes, there's tweaks, isn't there, every year to the existing version, and every 2 years, I think, is that correct, is a major update. So typically minor versions over the previous years, and some that is a major update, because guess what, technology changes, threat landscape changes, and we're just about to get the new Cyber Essentials 2026 version called Danzell. And it's interesting, the naming conventions for their versions are all from geographic locations in...
Well, I asked who delivered the scheme based for the NCSC. They're based in Malvern.
That's right.
Very famous for their springs, so their freshwater springs. So they're named after that.
So we're on Danzell coming out. some of it's not in the public domain yet, so we're going to be sensitive with that. What can we share? What do you think is the main highlight, or some of the highlights of this version, and what it's trying to achieve?
One thing to always remember is that the 5 pillars and the 5 technical controls, they're the same. They haven't changed.
That's right. Yeah.
It's the bits in there that that get you compliant from the technical controls. Some of that's changed a little bit. So a couple of the bigger highlights is it's MFA. To be fair, it's always up there. It's always
And that's multi-factor authentication.
multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
And so there's a bigger, not so much a bigger push, but there's a harder line
Right.
to be compliant on that. So essentially, if your cloud service supports MFA and you're not applying it, that's an instant fail of the assessment.
And we know that because historically and currently as well, that when people have different passwords to different systems, that some people choose less secure passwords, their favorite football team. And, they're waiting to be let down because the password's unsecure. So what helps that process is to have another level of authentication, like a text message, an app on your phone that gives a code, like similar to the bank card that you have, and that's called two-factor authentication.
Just by touching passwords there, there's a section built in there now for passwordless controls. Passwordless is where we're not typing in a password every day you read to access a computer, but there's an encrypted control of like a device, like a mobile phone or a physical key, that will grant us access without typing that password in that's unique to your account. So there'll be some technical controls around that also going forward.
That's great, Paul. So that's a good highlight. Is there anything else that you feel that our people listening or watching this should know about the new Danzell version?
Whilst these are not technical controls, these are points that should be ignored and they need to be brought to the forefront when you've been going through it. So, one of the points is there when you sign the declaration. So the declaration is saying that the answers to the questions are valid, because CE is a self-assessment essentially. It's just being assessed. As part of that declaration, it's signed by a director or a board member. So the declaration wording's changed ever so slightly to say that the person signing it is confirming that them and the organisation will work the CE and the controls between during the assessment, which lasts 12 months. So that's also just to get away from the fact that Cyber Essentials is a framework that needs to be worked. So it's not a certificate just to hang on the wall and wait till next year for it. It needs to come forward as well. It's a point in time assessment. So the assessment is not what good looks like, and for your organisation, your security, it's where it is at the point where it's been certified. Okay, so not submitted, but certified.
And I completely agree. I think that's always been our thinking about Cyber Essentials, and it always has been the case that it is a continuous certification throughout the year.
Yeah.
And I've always looked at it similar to, your service of your car, where, the service of the car might pass, that, next week, if the car's got flat tires or the brakes don't work, you wouldn't wait another 11 months to get those changed. You deal with it instantly. So this is where the understanding of Cyber Essentials is very clear, that it's a continuous journey, and critically, as you're highlighting, a cultural journey, which sometimes I think is missed. Really one of the key objectives and one of the exciting parts that comes out of Cyber Essentials is the organizational journey. It matures the physical stuff, IT, but it also creates a good solid base culture.
That's probably one of the best points, because even as a cyber advisor or anybody wanting to do CE, always say to them who've never done it before, this is where you need you need to get the organisation involved. If you don't get the organisation involved with what you're doing, then the CE, quite frankly, just won't work. It's about making, you need to make the organisation aware of the controls. You need to make them aware of where, if there's a new cloud service that's being adopted, that it's like, do you know what? We need to put MFA on. We need to check that that cloud service that we want to use meets the security standard of the CE framework.
So, we've been talking about Cyber Essentials. The elephant in the room is Cyber Essentials Plus. What is it? How can we best explain that to people that are listening?
Yeah, so probably the easiest way to understand what Plus is CE is a self-assessment, as I touched on earlier, essentially, which is then certified by a CE assessor, who are marking the questions based on the information that's being provided for compliance. The plus part of that is the audited version of CE, where a CE plus assessor, there is a difference between a CE assessor and a CE plus assessor, will take your assessment within a 90-day window of you first achieving CE, and essentially looking through the assessment and checking that it's actually in place. You're doing what you said you've done, and you have the equipment that you say you have, and you have the controls in place that you've stated that you've got. So it's lifting the hood on it a little bit and to actually make sure you're doing what you have said you've done.
And what the Cyber Essentials Plus assessor will do is look at a pool of a percentage of your equipment and check that is as it should be.
Exactly. Yeah. They'll check that it's got the right updates. They'll check that the version ends are there. They'll check that the security software that stays in place and it's got a firewall and things like that. So just checking it's doing what you say just done.
So we think of Cyber Essentials as the compliance. Cyber Essentials Plus really should be called Cyber Essentials Audited, but it's unaudited, so it comes after the facts. Thank you. So organizations that are thinking about the journey Cyber Essentials and they're looking at Cyber Essentials Plus, how would we best advise that journey? Why would they need to do Plus?
Well, there are a couple of reasons why an organisation would want to do it. Majority of time, from what I can see from my experience, organisations want to do it or actually need to do it is the supply chain. They're in the supply chain somewhere, and whoever they're supplying or working with has a requirement in that contract that they will have CE plus.
Yeah.
So it can be as simple as that. Other organisations that I know of or work with see it as their own compliance. So they're testing themselves as an organisation. So they're making sure we said we're doing that, but do you know what? Are we really? So they look to test themselves, and
that's a good point.
Which shows a mature organisation that's mature and serious about your own security. And that essentially gives them the CE plus badge. It's a badge of honour for them at that point there.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So supplier drilling, customer driving, their supplier, to be compliant against Cyber Essentials Plus, and then you have the governmental standards, so like defence contracts, day one, medical industry, etc., etc. So we've talked about IASNI's or the house Cyber Essentials changes over the years, so minor versions and then a major version, and we're just about to get the major version at the end of April. So there's a deadline for the previous version, I think is the 27th of April.
What that means is on the 27th of April, any new assessments that are being signed up to must meet the new Danzell standard.
Right.
Any assessments that are in progress that were created before the 27th generally will have a particular window. I don't know what that date is at the moment from the NCSE, but it's typically 6 months after that date. So that would take us to the end of October.
And that's good to know, because organizations that have started the Cyber Essentials journey, a number of months ago, that might be working through it a little bit slowly or might be struggling, they do have a finite window after the 27th of April. When you go through Cyber Essentials certified assessments, either our customers or the pool assessments that we get access to as well, UK-wide as well, what are some of the common challenges that organizations go through?
So again, from my own experience of doing it, I'm not saying this is a national thing, but certainly from my own experience, understanding the assets is for me one of the biggest things that organizations struggle with. Actually knowing what they've got, and who's using what equipment, and against the latest version of updates. So I don't know what causes that. I think it's an understanding piece, and of knowing, you know what, I need this version of Mac OS, or I need this version of Windows, and this build is now out of date on this particular date here. So I certainly think that, there needs to be maybe a little bit more in the public domain that tells us about these dates, because that essentially will create the failure of CE. So that's certainly the biggest struggle I see.
You can only protect the things that you know that you have. And sometimes I think organizations, these grow, right, because people might give access to their employees or stakeholders on their own devices. So the IT estate isn't just about what the organization have bought. But this is the great thing about Cyber Essentials. It kind of ring fences all of that, asks some pointed questions about who and why and what are using the IT. And it kind of, as you say, helps create that asset register.
An asset registers doesn't need to be some big complicated database. It doesn't need to have screeds of information. So you can have an effective asset register by using a spreadsheet. Stating, who's got this device and what version is on. That's
I mean, some of the events that I talk at, the first point that I talk about is the asset management, and absolutely right, the spreadsheet, literally 4 columns, what device, who owns it or uses it, operating system version, a couple of other columns if that, but just that straightforward. And the flip side to that is the software asset register. So having an understanding what software is used in the business, both software that's installed on the computers, but also, because guess what? Most software these days that's used is a cloud service like, Zero accounts or Canva or, whatever else. So understanding what cloud applications are used as well.
And that's probably the best point, because asset register is not about physical hardware that you use. It's about the cloud services that you use, because guess what? The cloud services in CE works the multi-factor authentication. So I've worked with many customers over the years that, quite frankly, some of them don't even know what cloud services they're using. So these become frustrating for the customer, but also become, a little bit frustrating for the assessor as well.
I think that goes back to the cultural responsibility of the management, responsibility of the organizations. This isn't, it may appear as rocket science at first, but actually it's quite pragmatic, quite sensible controls. What assets do you have, both physical and virtual? Listing those. And I think that, as you're right now, 10 times they're quite a shock to the organization, going, goodness me, we have all these cloud services that we were unaware of, that actually our data's on that. Yeah. So some really good advice there. So for organizations that we've perked their interest, shall we say, with Cyber Essentials, and they don't know what to do next, what would our advice be?
My advice would be, get onto the NCSC's and IASME's website. They have some great information in there. You can actually download the question set for CE without actually doing the assessment. Obviously, you won't be certified, but even just grabbing the assessment and working through the question set as an organization and using that to start putting controls, but understand your controls based on the question set. That's where I would start first, and essentially you can build yourself a gaps analysis there, and be CE ready, and it'll help close off some big gaps. I think if you've got that, you would recognize it, and then from there on there, and with not a lot of effort, I would say, you can be ready then just to go for the certification.
Good. That's good to know. And I think just to add, organizations that feel that they need that extra bit of support, that bit of help, as you were talking about earlier, the Cyber Advisor scheme, which is UK wide. If you go onto the IASME website, so IASME website, you can find a Cyber Advisor certified bodies in the UK. Which the Grant McGregor is one of those.
Yeah.
But so that there's a database there of all the organizations that do that. And for somebody that wants to and feel that they're ready for Cyber Essentials, that can be, it doesn't matter about location for that. So an organization like us have and do certify organizations throughout the UK. But again, on the IASME website, you'll find all the certification bodies there that can provide Cyber Essentials.
That's right.
Certified assessors. Great. Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks for your insights and your time today. That was very enjoyable. And thank you for joining us on the IT Bridge today, where we've talked about Cyber Essentials, where it has come from, where it's going, and some of the future updates, and how you could start that cyber security journey with the NCSC IASME Cyber Advisor scheme, which I think is such a great, important scheme that maybe you might have not heard of before. So hopefully some insights there. And thank you for joining us.